Freak shows were much more popular 50 years ago than they are today. In fact, they're now illegal. They were once a staple at state fairs, carnivals, and circus sideshows. Curtains were tightly drawn around tents promising a three-headed lady or alligator boy. Curious visitors wondered what was inside and often handed over cash for a quick peek. More often than not, they left disappointed, as most of these spectacles were nothing more than a gimmick. Most, but not all. So join us as we take a look at the 15 sideshow freaks that actually existed. Number 15. Irma Lustau. Irma Lustau's name hit European banners in thick black paint. Die Panther Dame, the Panther Woman. She was born in France with skin marked by dark ringed spots circling her legs and a thick band of hair wrapped around her scalp. Because of these features, they called her the leopard-spotted woman. She worked the sideshows during Europe's obsession with the exotic, when cruelty was dressed up as curiosity. But Irma didn't growl or crawl like they wanted. She stood silent, let them stare. That made her unforgettable. In old photos, her eyes look half regal, half drained, like someone who knew the world would never really get it. She didn't fake animalism for a cheap scream. She didn't sell out the way they asked. She simply stood there, real and unflinching. Nobody knows much about how her story ended, but she's still remembered, not as a freak, but as a woman who refused to flinch, even when the crowd wanted her to. Number 14. Talon Crawford. Talon Crawford was born back in the days of 1975, and by the time he could walk, people had already nicknamed him Bat Boy. Not because he asked for it, but because his face, sharp lines, wide-set eyes, made strangers stare. He stood only 3.5 feet tall. That didn't stop him, however. Talon turned what they whispered into a spotlight. He toured small sideshows across the U.S., billed as the outcast, cracking jokes, telling stories, and owning every second on stage. He wasn't a gimmick. He was a performer, a damn good one. But by 2005, he stepped away. Married to Roxy, with a baby girl on the way, he said, "I didn't retire out of shame. I just wanted to be home when she took her first steps." And that says everything. Most performers don't get a graceful exit. He did. He knew when to stand tall and when to sit it out. He wasn't a sideshow act. He was a husband, a dad, and he chose love over the spotlight. Number 13. The Petrified Man of Florida. After World War II, down in the phosphate mines of Mulberry, Florida, Omar Buckner swore he found something insane, a 12-foot-long petrified man. I mean, not a skull or a bone, a full body. Alongside it were 2 old dugout canoes. Buckner, a former Navy engineer turned dragline operator, thought he had hit history. His bosses shut the site down instantly. They didn't want mining operations stalled over legends. Buckner asked if he could keep it. They let him. He loaded the giant onto a trailer and took it home. Later, it sat in a dusty Ohio museum, then ended up at Ripley's in Orlando. Scientists called it a hoax. But Buckner didn't care at all. He swore to his dying breath that it was real. He never made a fortune from it, never cashed in. He just wanted people to see. True or not, it became a local myth. And in the end, maybe the strangest thing about the petrified man is how fast wonder gets bulldozed by business. Number 12. The Man with Hanging Skin. Now this one is amazing. In 1933, at Ripley's Auditorium in Chicago, Arthur Lewis stepped onto the stage and didn't say a single word. He didn't have to. His face did all the talking. It was covered in massive, drooping folds of skin, cheeks, jaw, neck, like wet cloth sagging from his bones. Arthur had neurofibromatosis, a rare condition that twists the skin and nerves into growths. He was 42 when Ripley's hired him. Most people would have hidden. Arthur didn't. He showed up, day after day, let the stares happen, And he never dressed it up with drama or pity. No speeches, no masks. Just a man standing in the middle of a crowd that couldn't look away. He stayed with Ripley's for years. The last time anyone heard of him was 1991. He was reportedly dying at 97. That means almost a century lived with the kind of face most people fear. But Arthur, he wore it. And that's more strength than most of us will ever understand. Number 11. The Fat Lady of Coney Island. Amanda Siebert never planned to be Jolly Irene. At 21, after her first child, something went wrong inside her body. A brutal hormonal shift sent her weight climbing fast. By the time it stopped, she weighed nearly 700 pounds. Well, yup, 700 pounds. She could have disappeared. Instead, she signed on with the Ringling Brothers as Jolly Irene, a mix of stage name and real spirit. Because yeah, she was heavy. But she was also hilarious, loud, and bigger than any insult tossed her way. When train cars became too cramped to hold her, she settled in Coney Island and stayed. Crowds came to see her size. They left talking about her energy. Irene never apologized for her body. She never asked to be small. She turned her condition into a career on her own terms. She didn't ask for sympathy. She demanded respect. She wasn't a joke, wasn't a circus freak. She was Irene, a real human, and she made damn sure nobody ever forgot it. Number 10. The Elephant Face Girl. Anita never had a story that made headlines, but her face did. They called her the Elephant Face Girl, and that name stuck like glue. Cruel, unoriginal, and loud. Her facial deformity was extreme, probably from a severe case of neurofibromatosis, but no one ever really asked for the medical term. To promoters, she was instant profit. She ended up in the Ripley's Believe It or Not circuit, and that's about all we know for sure. No backstory, no interviews, just photos, flyers, and crowd memories. People remembered her as shy, warm, and strangely graceful. She didn't sing. She didn't dance. She just stood still and held space like someone who knew the world couldn't look away. And she didn't blink. Some people stared. Some people looked once and turned away fast. But Anita stood there through all of it. Her name faded. Her records disappeared. But those who saw her never forgot her. Not because of her face, but because she didn't hide from it. Number 9. The White Negress. Amelia Newsham was born in Jamaica to enslaved African parents, but her skin was pale as bone. She was albino. That alone sealed her fate. She was taken from her family and shipped to London as a gift, like cargo, given to her owner's son. He sold her. She was turned into a spectacle, put on display in Thomas Hall's House of Curiosities in the 1790s, labeled the White Negress. Crowds paid a shilling to watch her recite a poem about her white wool and African features. She stood there, half art, half prisoner, souvenir coins made with her face on them. But Amelia didn't disappear. She got free, married an Englishman, had 6 children, and strangely, kept performing, but this time on her own terms. Same poem, same presence. But now she controlled the story. She survived the worst parts of history and still found a way to own her space. She was never just a display. She was a woman who refused to vanish. Number 8. Hop the Frog Boy. Samuel didn't crawl on stage looking for pity. He crawled because walking wasn't an option. Born with osteogenesis imperfecta, his bones broke like glass. Limbs bent, ribs cracked, and pain came daily. By 1893, he was at the Chicago World's Fair, labeled a medical exhibit. But Sam had other plans. He turned himself into Hop the Frog Boy. He moved on all fours, let the crowd stare, and leaned into the spectacle. Promoters said he had the body of a frog and the face of a man. What they didn't sell was the story behind the act. Sam lost his first wife during childbirth. His newborn survived. He remarried a fellow performer called the Connecticut Midget. and they toured as the world's strangest couple. It sounds like a headline, but it was his life. Hard, weird, and full of hustle. Sam wasn't a gimmick. He was a man with shattered bones and unshattered will. He didn't fold. He turned fragility into survival, and he kept crawling forward. Number 7. The giant body of Edouard Beaupré. Edouard Beaupré was born in 1881 in Willow Bunch, a prairie town so small he was the first baby baptized there. He started out normal, nothing strange, but by age 9 he was already 6 feet tall. By 20, he towered over 7 feet 8. He loved horses, wanted to be a cowboy, but one kick to the face broke his nose, and that dream. His family nudged him toward the stage. Edouard performed across the U.S. as both a strong man and a giant. At Barnum and Bailey, he lifted anchors, broke records, and even hoisted a horse onto his back. But his body was dying the whole time. In 1904, just 23, he collapsed after a show in St. Louis. Tuberculosis killed him. His death wasn't the end. His body was stolen, put on display, mummified, cut open for study. It took 85 years before he was finally laid to rest. Edouard was a gentle man in a giant's frame, and the world gave him no peace. All right, now, let's move to number 6, Peter Robinson. Peter Robinson looked like a pencil sketch of a man, skin tight over bones, no softness anywhere. As an adult, he barely weighed 60 pounds. He was called the human skeleton, paired on stage with Bunny Smith, his wife, who was a fat lady performer weighing nearly 470 pounds. The contrast sold tickets. The posters made them look like cartoon opposites. But Peter wasn't a joke. He started performing at Coney Island, then toured with major circuses, building a long career on grit and timing. He didn't lean on shock, he leaned on discipline. He even landed a role in Todd Browning's Freaks in 1932, a film that blurred fiction and the reality Peter had lived for years. Away from the circus lights, he was quiet, sharp, and persistent. He toured for decades, built a life, and never let the stage turn him into less than human. Peter wasn't just skin and bone. He was a working gentleman in a world that turned bodies into theater. Number 5. Lothar Geyer. Grace and danger lived in Lothar Geyer's hands. He arrived in America with Fritz Furcht's Freelanis bicycle troupe, turning balance into theater. 7 riders stacked on a single bicycle in a finale that made the tent gasp. When a female rider quit, a young woman from Essex named Jill Goading filled the space. She and Lothar soon married, their partnership spilling from stage to life. While performing with the Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers Circus, Lothar obtained Joe Galasso's finger stand apparatus and began crafting a solo act of impossible control. Dressed in a tuxedo, Jill in a gown, he seemed to hang in air like a sculpture. Years later, their marriage ended. Lothar remarried, left the ring, and built a fishing charter business in Florida, trading applause for ocean quiet. Yet his name still lingers wherever circus history remembers poetry built on balance. The man who stood on his hands so still, the crowd forgot to breathe. Number 4. Alexander Montague. Alexander Montague stepped on stage so thin he looked like a shadow. By the 1850s, he was one of P.T. Barnum's living skeletons. But Montague refused to play for shock. At just 54 pounds, his chest 4 inches thick, wrists thinner than a thumb, he lifted a violin and played. No costumes, no gimmicks. Just a body science couldn't explain, and a melody that filled the tent. Through the 1860s, he toured steadily, a quiet figure drawing huge crowds, not by theatrics, but by presence. When imitators appeared, gaunter, louder, desperate for attention, they couldn't match the stillness that made him unforgettable. He showed audiences that frailty didn't have to be grotesque. It could be graceful. Montague didn't chase fame or freak show billing. He simply stood there and held it, His act wasn't a display of a thin man, it was a lesson in dignity. Even in a body that seemed to vanish, he carried music that stayed long after the bow left the strings. Number 3. Mechanical men. Audiences in the early 1900s wanted oddity, but they also wanted the future. The mechanical men gave them both. One of the most famous acts had no name at all, a sharply dressed figure moving with eerie precision, head tilting, arms jerking, like gears hidden under skin. Electrical wires snaked from his suit while a poised woman stood nearby, rumored to be the controller, silent as a magician's assistant. He walked, paused, and never broke character. A manager offered $100 to any woman who could make him smile. No one did. During a publicity stunt, the figure was taken to the steps of the Treasury building in Washington during a war savings rally and tumbled down the stairs without injury. Was it a man? A machine? A hoax? The crowd never got an answer. They didn't care. They'd already seen what they came for, something that shouldn't exist, moving right there in front of them. Humans love this stuff. Number 2. Alfredo Codona. There was Flight, and then there was Alfredo Codona, a man who didn't just soar but tore gravity apart. Born into a family of flyers, he grew up beneath the canvas, above the crowd, where applause drowned out fear. By the time others practiced simple tricks, Alfredo was already twisting through triple somersaults, earning the awe of legends like Art Concello. He loved with the same intensity. He married aerialist Lillian Leitzel, whose grace matched her temper. Their passion burned hot, sometimes too hot, but when she fell to her death during a performance in Copenhagen, Alfredo never quite landed again. He tried. He married Vera Bruce, toured again, but something inside him stayed broken. After an injury ended his act and his new marriage unraveled, Alfredo snapped. In 1937, he shot Vera, then himself. The man who once ruled the air left the world like a flame, a flyer who couldn't find the ground after the fall. Number 1. Little Count Teddy. Theo Salem, billed as Little Count Teddy, wasn't just small, he was a showman. Born July 23, 1885 in Louisville, he stood even shorter than Tom Thumb, but his act wasn't about his size, it was about his voice. He performed poems, satire, lectures, and a strange genre he called laughology. His posters promised laughs and lessons under the banner, "Yours for amusement." His slogan cracked like a vaudeville punchline. Smaller than Tom Thumb and still single. But behind the quips, Theo was one of the last miniature performers to tour solo on his own terms. No freak show banner, no fake backstory, just a man under 3 feet tall who sold punchlines and poetry to crowds. He may not have drawn the biggest tent, but his words lingered long after the laughter. We hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.